I love the Marvels, and here's why. There's so much discussion around the MCU being disconnected, feeling bloated, ruining the legacy they established. Simultaneously, Hollywood has been going through massive changes, absolutely ravaged by the way that streaming has kind of flown in and incredibly changed the way that media is not only created, but distributed and consumed. This general sense of unease and uncertainty leads to the pieces like the Variety article we all saw come out at the beginning of this week, basically dooming Marvel and whatever future plans they had. But the Marvels, ironically, is proof that quality storytelling still exists in Hollywood and specifically in the MCU.
Hey, look at us.
Look at us. Huh? Who would have thought? Not me.
This movie almost seemed to set out to fix a lot of these criticisms against not only the MCU, but the problems in Hollywood and this existential identity crisis it's been going through. And that's partially why it feels so serendipitous that the SAG strike would end the same day that this movie releases. I think the chief valid criticism that can be laid against Captain Marvel and her first solo movie is that she's overpowered. She can just smash through buildings, ships, basically goes toe for toe with Thanos in terms of strength. She just doesn't feel like a character that's relatable or that feels like she could be part of a real Avengers team because she's kind of the team. She has super strength, she has speed, she flies, she shoots sunlight electric power out of her hands and just never seems to get tired or take much of a scratch. So how do you make a character like this, who is literally invincible, compelling? You connect her powers to lesser superheroes, people who have to be a part of a team because they don't have enough experience, they're not strong enough on their own, and then you force someone cocky enough, somewhat like Carol Danvers, to not be able to work on her own to solve the problems facing her, to have to learn to get along with a team. And you put her with people who are directly connected with her, her biggest fan and her long-lost niece. Another chief criticism of Captain Marvel in the past has been that her character is wildly underdeveloped, that they didn't give Brie Larson enough time or story context compared to the characters and actors she was up against in their roles for literal decades when she first arrived on the scene. But she quite literally, story-wise, had her memory wiped. Like, this Carol does not have active memories prior to the first Captain Marvel movie. What you do in this movie is you allow a Oscar winner like Brie Larson to do what she does best, which is react and work with other actors in an environment, again, where her character has to. You also allow these characters to sort of project onto her character. If you're gonna say that she's as bland as a cardboard box, well, you can paint on a cardboard box, you can draw on it, and that's exactly what Kamala Khan does. Kamala Khan is her biggest fan. She puts her up on this moral pedestal, this absolutely idealized being who, through the events of the film, she learns that this is actually a real person. Like, before she was a superhero, she was a human being with thoughts, feelings, and emotions. And despite the fact that she's overpowered, she can't always do everything right to save everyone all the time. That's so interesting to get to watch a character as young as Kamala see her hero, her idol, that faith in her that was previously unwavering, see it falter a little bit, see where that takes their relationship. Such good stuff. And then, on the other hand, you introduce a character like Monica Rambeau, a character who has grown up virtually alone, who has suffered massive loss, not only from the loss of her mother, but of a loss of a friend and an understanding of what's going on when she was in WandaVision, and also a loss because she was blipped. She lost years of her life. Much like Carol, there are years she missed out on or does not remember because she quite literally wasn't there for them. It honestly is super interesting to see a character like Monica Rambeau almost present fan criticisms and project those onto Captain Marvel. So while Kamala is praising her and having all of this love put onto Captain Marvel, Monica Rambeau kind of levels a claim like, there are planets other than Earth that need my help. And she kind of says like, well, you never came back for me. I don't really want anything that you have to offer. I don't really want to be a part of this team with you. And again, that kind of trio of characters is so interesting. Additionally, with the fact that their powers are interconnected and the fact that the central premise of the movie is that they swap places when they use their powers at the same time, you force a character like Captain Marvel to quite literally not be as powerful as she would be on her own. And that is fascinating because usually in these team-up movies, we get more and more characters together to take on a bigger, badder, more powerful bad guy, and they have to be together to take them on. Whereas in this one, if Captain Marvel was alone and her powers were working properly, maybe she would have been able to take out dar-benn. She would ordinarily possibly be able to do this by herself, but because of the issue with the powers, which is explained within the film, she can't do that. And that makes this film so much more interesting and honestly makes it necessary that all three are there because quite literally they would be swapping in and out. Speaking of dar-benn, we have a villain who adds to the concept of a flawed hero, of heroes' actions not always saving the day and not always being happy, shiny, sunny thing. She almost sides more on the Monica side of like, wait a minute, there's things you've done that are not perfect, ma'am. She is effective not only because she is working to solve issues she sees in her own life and in her own world with her own people, but also because she's kind of right. I know this makes a lot of MCU fans sound like a broken record because anytime a Marvel villain is right or has validity to their argument or their cause or their motive, they ultimately end up being a better villain in the eyes of fans. But that's just good writing. Like, it's super effective. And in this film, there's a couple shots that I can't wait to talk about once everyone has seen this film that really communicate why this character would have a following or why this character would be able to get away with the things she's doing. And maybe she's doing the right thing. It also centers on some things that have happened directly in the first Captain Marvel film, and again, levels that criticism of Captain Marvel's just out there saving everybody that the Avengers can't. Well, the Avengers make mistakes sometimes, and maybe you do too, babe. And Zaw Ashton did such a phenomenal job in how this character is portrayed. The story really does it justice because you see this character of dar-benn go from a person who is maybe morally ambiguous in their actions to try to accomplish something that is kind of a valid cause to making certain choices that ultimately prove her to be the villain that the film paints her as. And I just think that is phenomenal writing and I really appreciate it. And all of this goes back to character analysis and character relationships. That's where the MCU shines. This is something I've always believed. This is something I've always tried to explain to people, that the MCU is not about superheroes. It's about normal people dealing with supernatural kind of circumstances. When we get away from that by throwing in extra CGI or making a character have so many superpowers you can't even count them and they have no actual relationship with anyone, that's boring. That's not interesting. Those are not stories that we as human beings can connect to. Also, the thing I really want to commend this film on is using pre-existing relationships because, and I feel crazy saying this, but previously to this movie, prior to this film, we had sort of been implied that the Marvel directors of the movies and the writers just didn't really care about the TV shows, which is like, that's so insulting to your fan base when you are charging them $16 a month to be able to watch your 6-episode miniseries. And yet here we finally get to sink our teeth into a reward of having watched other stuff, which is like I hate the fact that that's amazing because this used to be kind of common for the MCU, but it makes me hopeful that going into the future, there will be more of this. And so I really just want to praise this writing team and directing team for seamlessly integrating shows like Ms. Marvel and WandaVision into this, effectively using those stories the right way, realizing that Kamala's family is an integral part of that show and they needed to be present here. Same way that in WandaVision, there are very specific things that happen to Monica, not just her getting her powers, but we need to see her relationship with her mother, her feeling of loss from the blip. Seeing all of that play out here is so incredibly important. And who'd have thought that possible? I don't know, but I think that the writers and directors of the Marvels should be laughing in the faces of the people that did Multiverse Madness. And maybe that's a hot take, and maybe that's a little bit rude of me, but you know what? I just quite honestly don't care. The other thing I really want to mention about this film, it's incredibly efficient. It is about an hour and 45 minutes, which I believe is the shortest film the MCU has ever put out. This is coming off of the tail of Ant-Man Quantumania, which was previously the shortest film that Marvel had been put out. This film really does, again, what good films should. It takes stock of all of its pieces, its characters, its plot points, its action pieces, its sets, its previous knowledge, Easter eggs, and it has fun with it and uses them all pretty effectively. It's not a perfect movie. There's definitely several plot holes, and towards the end, I think there's a couple things that if the film overall weren't so enjoyable and great, I'd probably point out more. But here, I really feel like the MCU is ignoring and rejecting the concept of a longer runtime. I personally feel that some of the Marvel films that have suffered most recently have been the longer ones. They've had more time to kind of breathe and wait and sit in a scene, and the longer a movie gets, it's like, why not add 5 more minutes, or why not just not cut this scene? And I understand that in certain films, it feels more necessary to have a longer time to tell your story, Endgame being a primary example of that. But at the same time, movies never used to be longer than like 2.5 to 3 hours. Like that was kind of, we're capping out at that. And we've had a couple movies that have gone above the 3-hour point. And I just wanted to commend again the creative team and the people that made this film possible for really working with what they needed to and giving us something that has both references, new ideas, sets up things in the future, as well as just making a good, solid story. This review is already 15 minutes long as I'm filming this, so I'm gonna go into rapid fire mode here. Kamala is a gem, and I want to see her more and more, and I think the way that she and her family again are used in this film is so great. Monica feels fuller and more realized as a character than she ever has been before. This movie is truly funny without being gaggy. Like, if you weren't a fan of Thor: Love and Thunder and feel like maybe some of the high saturation, different colors, kind of rainbowy effect of some of the promos of this film, don't worry, I don't think the gags are really that horrendous here. This is what late stage MCU should feel like, in my opinion. We are bringing in, again, references. We're bringing in characters who are quite literally fans themselves. That's what Kamala Khan is. That's the function of her character. And we're able to use her to connect different through lines. I don't know, like, it's just so phenomenal to me that a character that literally came out in a TV show last year for the first time in live action is now here in a feature film, and she's killing it. She was like one of my favorite parts of this movie, and I love the movie, so that's really saying something. Fury, to me, is returned to his former pre-Secret Invasion glory. I don't know what they were doing with Secret Invasion, but whoever was in charge of this one was basically like, let's not reference that at all. Let's just kind of leave that where it is, which I think was the right decision. Also, 1,000 ships, like relationships, shipping of characters, will be launched from this, and maybe I'm over exaggerating, maybe it's just like a couple or a handful or 2, but I can't wait for the internet to react to this film. The biggest thing about this movie that I love, and I've saved this for the end, is that to me, it does not bash men. I know there's gonna be so many people on the internet that are once again reviving the Captain Marvel hate, reviving the female superhero hate, being like, why do you have to do this? Why do you have to do that? And to me, this film feels like kind of what the Barbie movie did. It's maybe not as girly and as feminine forward as the Barbie movie for sure, but it allows this kind of, there's a couple scenes where the characters are sort of, you get to see the characters after battle and realistically think like, oh yeah, they would change clothes. They wouldn't stay in their like fight ready, sweaty, alien bloody uniform. Like they would change. And then there were moments that followed it that felt a little bit like a sleepover. So this movie's a little bit for the girlies, and it doesn't hate on men in any sort of explicit way or make it feel like, oh, there's only 2 male characters and they all suck and they're all dumb. No, the male characters in this film are very important. They're very full-fledged characters. They have important relationships to the 3 female superheroes at the center and core of this film. And yet, there will still be people mad online, but I really don't care about that. I can't remember the last time the MCU has made me feel this way. Electric, excited, laughing, screaming, shaking, crying, and that was just the film, not even anything that happens in the post-credit scenes. Guardians Volume 3 left me really crying. I enjoyed it, but I cried a lot. Quantumania was good. The more I think about it, the less I can remember it. And this is all coming from someone who early this Monday would have told you the biggest mistake the MCU could be making right now is releasing the Marvels the same day as the Loki Season 2 finale, believing that the MCU is only as good as its last output, and this was gonna crush any of the goodwill that had been bought with Loki Season 2. And I'm here happy to completely reject that ideology and tell you, please go see Captain Marvel in theaters tonight, tomorrow, this weekend, whenever you can, and leave me your review in the comments below. Subscribe for tons more MCU content, and I'll see you all in the next one. Higher, further, faster, baby.